You've been a part of Passion City Worship, right? That's what you guys call yourself.
Passion music.
Now you're a big establishment.
Right.
Now you do conferences to tens of thousands of people. How do you solve the problem of tension of becoming an artist but keeping the humility?
The whole point of your job is to get eyes on Jesus.
Yeah.
And yet you stand in front of people and there's lights and there's maybe some screens. You could be leading worship in a church wherever you're listening to this today, and you could be big in your own world. This wrestle is like for any of us who get up in front of people and try and lead and shepherd. They said, hey, we love your song. What if someone else sang it? And I remember the first time that happened and it didn't feel good. And I had a friend who I was just trying to process this with. He goes, hey, Brett, but aren't you trying to write songs for the church to sing? And I was like, yeah. He goes,
hey, everybody, this is Rita Springer. Welcome to the Rita Springer podcast and another episode of Worship is My Weapon. Another very exciting episode here. I'm in a conversation today with none other than the great Brett. I don't want to screw up your last name. I want to say Younker, right?
You nailed it.
But it's spelled different?
It's spelled
Younker.
Yeah.
Is it Scandinavian?
I think it's like German. It's very, I've got a lot of European mix in me. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
But it's just pronounced Younker.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's been Southern fried over time.
Yeah. Are you from the South?
I am. I grew up outside Atlanta, Metro Atlanta.
Well, so you've been there, Georgia, for a long time.
I have. I grew up in Marietta, which is where I actually live now. Didn't see that in the cards.
Wow.
And then,
Marietta is so beautiful.
It's awesome.
It's great. A ways away from Atlanta, but
it's not too bad.
In
it's
traffic.
Not too bad. It's like 30 minutes. Well, traffic, Nashville, you got your own traffic here too,
True.
But then I went to college at University of South Carolina, lived in New York City for a little bit, and then me and my wife lived in East Atlanta for a long, long time until a few years ago we moved back to Marietta.
Well, so because I don't have reference like for your history, you've been a part of Passion City Worship, right? That's what you guys call yourselves.
Passion music.
Passion music. Okay. Because when I look it up on, or when I always tell Siri, she'll say Passion City Worship or something like that.
Nice.
You've been with them for quite a while.
I have.
How many years?
Well, we've been a part of the church since it started back in 2009, 2010. It's crazy. We're kind of like, it's weird to be like one of the older people.
Yeah, are you mix. Like the original core team that planted?
Yeah, we were part of that, and then started helping out. Got invited into the music process. Obviously, it was kind of an amazing season. Just with like my heroes moved to my hometown. You had like Chris Tomlin and his band, and Matt Redman, Nathan and Christy, and Louie and Shelley. And so again, just being a young worship leader, I mean, I was doing whatever around the church because I had gone to the conference as a college student. So it totally impacted me in a big way. And so when Louie and Shelley felt called to plant a church that kind of had the same DNA in my hometown, I was like, yeah, I want to be a part of that. And my wife and her family are all a part of that. And so we were getting married at the same time. So it's really where our lives kind of came together in life and ministry. And so 2010 got invited into the musical side of things. I was in the band at Passion 2010, but it was one of the singers. I'm pretty sure my mic was not on, and but it did. I mean, I was in the rehearsals and I was seeing, again, my heroes kind of do this thing that had made such an impact on my life, and got invited into the writing over the next few years. And then, around 2015, 16, 17, is kind of when Passion music and in terms of our era really began to form, which was, people like Christian and Melody and a lot of our team, really a team that just made up of people from Passion City Church, multiple worship leaders, multiple voices, kind of carrying the heart of our church and in the movement. Yeah.
So that wasn't planned when they planted the church.
What wasn't planned?
The passion worship side of it.
Yeah.
The idea is for it to become what it is now.
Yeah, I think especially looking in that time, kind of mid 2010s, I think just things had kind of moved from like individual artists to more of like collectives. Yeah. And we were a natural collective. I mean, we were all kind of planted at our church, serving, leading on Sundays. And so I think the heart and the vision was like, if we're going to continue to, find a new season or a new wave, hopefully it's just an overflow or outflow of kind of what we're doing in the week to week and the day to day. And so I'm sure somebody had a vision somewhere along the line, Louis and Shelley, they're always thinking, but
Yeah.
but at the same time too, I think it was really a lot of open-handedness, trust in God. And, and it really, it wasn't like something that happened overnight. It took a few years to kind of like figure out who is part of this and all of that good stuff too.
Okay. So before, I've got so many questions that are racing through my head that I want to ask you. But when you're young, because there's so many worship leaders that kind of watch this, do you feel like you had a calling at a young age to be a worship leader?
Yeah.
And is that because you were looking at the stage of your own church being like, I want to be on that stage doing this thing? Or what propelled you into the feeling that's, I think, has to be kind of in your marrow?
For sure. 100. I totally agree with you on that. Like you got to feel it down deep. And, I grew up in a Christian home, and my parents, they came to know Jesus in the 70s, kind of like what would be the Jesus movement in Southern California. It was like the Atlanta Southern version of that. And so they were, teenagers brought to a youth group and gave their lives to Jesus till, lives changed. And so that's how I was raised. And so I was raised in and around church, went to a little Christian school and all of that. And, but really around, middle school, all these things started happening. One, it's pretty crazy. Mac Powell was my worship leader for my youth group. This was before the Third Day rocket ship took off. Chris Tomlin played at my summer camp.
Before it took off.
Yeah, exactly.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was like mid 90s at this point. But when I was in middle school, it was just that space of, being at things like church camp and just going, I really want my life to be about Jesus. I don't just want to say I'm a Christian or I'm surrounded by all these things, but I really want to follow him. And meanwhile, I was watching things like the Beatles anthology, and I'm seeing on my TV how music is just like impacting the world. Meanwhile, I thought I wanted to play for the Atlanta Hawks. I want to play basketball, but if you're listening to this podcast and you're looking at me, you're going, that's not in the cards. And so it was this
you loved basketball.
I loved basketball, but there was this crossfade happening in those years of like, okay, basketball is probably not the path, but music might be. And my piano teacher kind of brought out a Beatles songbook. So I was so enamored with how music, especially me, I grew up listening to the music my parents listened to. And so it was like all of that era of music in the 60s and 70s, it was deeply connected to like something happening in people. And I didn't have language for it then, but I think looking back on it, when I listen to like Bob Dylan and I listen to these songs and you just see it's like, it's music that's expressing something that's happening in people and in society. And so I think, you get around Jesus, you get around church and you get around the movement of God, you're going, I was experiencing the presence of the Lord as a teenager. And we had a youth group that I met Christian, we were 8th grade.
Oh my God.
So we've been friends since we were 14.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy. And God was just moving in our community in Metro Atlanta, and all these teenagers were coming to know Jesus. And we had, it was a different era. It wasn't like, I had these like insane bands. There wasn't even a real band at our church. And so in the youth group, we were just made up of ragtag, they were like, oh, you play something? Great, get up there. But our youth pastor really believed in us and kind of said, hey, if you're gifted in this, and if you really work at it, and let me teach you. And he challenged us. There was one day we showed up, we weren't prepared. It was awful. And he pulled us into his office one by one and was like, let's not let that happen again, but in those years, I think he really just spoke a lot of belief in us, and to where I was like, God could use you to change the world. And we just bought it. And we wanted to use whatever we had to do that. And so all of that happening in my teenage years, I think experiencing God in those musical spaces and then seeing the impact music has on the world. I was like, I want to be a part of that. I want to do that. I don't know how to do that. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what kind of job that is, but whatever that is, I'm going to do that.
But you kind of walked into it without, did you have a word from the Lord as a kid?
Yeah. I think through my teenage years, I was like, again, just super plugged into my youth group and I was a leader in that. And I think, I joke around. I always came into it as a leader who's like, my music is catching up to the leadership,
Yes, yeah.
I joke I have a blue collar voice. And so like, I've always been working on my singing. But I think for me, it's just, I grew up in church. And again, I saw and experienced the Lord so powerfully in those musical spaces that I was like, I just want to be in that. I want to be in that space with people. And so, when I was in college, again, Louis was teaching a Bible study called 722 at the time, which was about half hour from where I lived. And it wasn't for it wasn't for like teenagers in high school. It was for like single adults.
God, I remember that.
Yeah. But everybody came. I mean, people came from all over the place. People were driving in again, because people weren't experiencing stuff like this. This wasn't the norm. And Louis would teach, and what I tell people on those nights, I just never heard anyone talk about Jesus like that.
Yeah.
I've heard great sermons, great messages, but I was like, this guy feels like he's been with Jesus, and now he's just telling us what Jesus' word says. Like it was real personal and real powerful, and
tangible to understand.
100%. And the worship in that space was so expressive. And again, that just wasn't the norm. And so I would drive over, I would buy the tapes from the talks and, like listen, I was just devouring all this stuff, and God was just changing my life so much in those years. So all that to say, I think as a teenager and as a college student, just felt called from the Lord to go, hey, you're going to give your life to this. You're going to be in ministry.
Yeah.
But yes, I didn't know what that was. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be a worship leader. And maybe I think as it unfolded, I might have thought that. But I think even the older I get, I really see that the calling that I feel is more of like, I want to help connect people to Jesus. And I can do that as a worship leader. I can do that as a songwriter. I can preach or teach. We can be hanging out.
Yeah.
But it's just, how can we be in that connective space where your eyes are open and you see Jesus? And if I'm in that zone, I'm great.
I mean, it's interesting too, because the way that you're talking, it's a very rare thing for me to talk to leaders like yourself, writers, songwriters, artists that have almost a similar background.
Yeah.
It was the vineyard for me.
Real, yeah.
And we had almost like a brotherhood, because we didn't know what we were doing. Nobody knew what was going on.
Yeah.
But the similar thing I think that I've always loved about what Lou and Shelley stand for is they're really beautiful, evolving and love for the arts.
Oh yeah.
For creativity as it relates to the creator.
Right.
And almost the boundary lines that can be pushed because of the creator.
Right.
And he's been such a big advocate of that for years and years.
Huge.
That isn't the normal
Right.
when a church is set up and then a worship team follows the setup.
Right.
And then music comes out of that worship team, and then records come out of that.
Right.
That's really not the normal.
Right.
It wasn't the normal back in the Vineyard day.
Yeah.
But John Wimber, who started the Vineyard, was part of the Righteous Brothers. And
Crazy. I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, he understood the music business. He understood creativity.
Yep.
He understood passion for music.
He was a musician too.
He was a musician.
Yeah.
And so we had a pastor
who valued
that
Yep.
and almost actually like lit a match and set us on fire.
Yeah.
And when we started writing songs, even, that was decades before you guys started, we were writing because, man, it was so cool that a melody could drop a tumor off a body.
Wow.
That's the way we're thinking.
I love that.
Which is such a beautiful thought process when there's no map for what you're doing.
Right.
It's the experience that you're having, and you're birthing an idea out of an experience, which is actually why I've always appreciated passion. Yeah. And those of you that have come out of it, I just haven't heard a lot of like, oh, did you hear so-and-so from Passion fell? You know what I'm saying? Because I think you guys have had such a beautiful backing of a mother and father who believed in the calling, not just for the sake of a calling,
right,
but attached to the vision of something God was so credible in. And you guys all have this same kind of lingo, which is actually quite stunning.
Yeah. Wow. That's cool.
And it has legacy attached to it. So when you talk about like you and Stanfield growing up together, it's like, oh yeah, like we were all in these little groups together, not knowing what all of us would become.
Right.
But we had that common language of,
Right.
did you hear what happened? Did you hear did you see what God did? Those were our conversations, which it sounds like those were your early conversations.
Oh, 100%. I mean, just when you see people, I mean, I would be so curious to know what were those days like in the vineyard or whatever. But like when you see people, when they give their lives to Jesus and faith is born and salvation is breaking out, and it's like, you want to find a worshiping church, just look where God is moving, and the songs are going to come. Like the songs are going to give some kind of expression to this thing that he's doing in a group of people. And I think that's the shepherding that Lou and Shelley have really given us, of like, hey, we do value this space, and they've given us lots of room. They've given us lots of a high task, a high like responsibility, stewardship of what we're doing. At the same time, we see what we're doing in service of what God is doing among his people, and so it's like, and so that's really helpful to me, because it kind of puts what we're doing and it's kind of in its place too, so it's not like it's important, but it's also like in context of like this big thing that he's doing in his people right now, Hey,
you guys, I just want to thank Amazing Life Foundation for making what I do here on this podcast possible. They are my rally team, my biggest supporters. Without Amazing Life, this podcast would not be coming to you. They've just got this insane team of editors. I've just had the best of the best, and I want to just give them a shout out. There's a lot of beautiful things that are coming out of Amazing Life Foundation, and I want you to stay tuned for some of those things. But I just want to shout out to them and thank them for making this podcast possible and bringing this podcast to you every Wednesday. And letting me do what I love to do. Well, and then how do you, because the journey that carries the tension of an establishing church that is established because of the move of the Holy Spirit, or the move of the presence of God in the midst of it.
Yep.
And the come as you are. That's why it's like the Vineyard had that come as you are thing. Shelley and Louie kind of just have that mother and father come, let me talk to you about Jesus in a way that maybe you've never heard anybody talk about Jesus before, that's the draw.
Yeah.
But now you're a big establishment.
Right.
Now there are thousands of people involved. Now you do conferences to tens of thousands of people. There's always that really interesting fine line when it becomes a church that's functioning in this beautiful thing, and then all of a sudden we're a business.
Yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah, it's a thing, and we're a corporation. When I was on staff at Gateway for years, I think that's when the brutality and the awareness of, oh, you mean when it crosses the line of this many people, you're a corporation now.
Oh, right.
You're not a church. You're considered a corporation.
Right.
And that's almost abrasive when it comes to letting people go. I mean, there's just all of those ramifications because now it's corporate and it's legal. When you talk about the worship from that perspective and you become a church full of artists, now you're artists. Where's the line? And how do you solve the problem of tension of becoming an artist, but keeping the humility, keeping the thing that was always about the thing?
Yeah.
Where's that line for you?
That's a great question. I think it is exactly what you said. It's a tension. And I think there's not a moment where you're like, okay, figured it out. Let me make the online course. I figured this out. I don't think I've arrived quite there yet, but I do definitely resonate with that because me and Ansley, my wife, have been around since the early days of Passion City. And so, I mean, I remember when we opened the doors of our church and we were at the Tabernacle, this amazing venue in downtown Atlanta, and we ended up doing 2 gatherings that night. And we were bouncing around venues, and it was this like, it felt alive and this thing.
Yeah.
And, then we got a building, and it was so great to get a building because we were, we weren't nomadic anymore. And, and it actually spoke something to the city to say, we're here, we're rooted and planted. And so that was like a good thing to do. And now we have 3 locations in Atlanta. We have 1 in DC, and I've seen, I've been at our church for over 15 years now, and I've seen it grow and shift and change. And I think I'm 41, so I think my answer is different today than it would have been if I was like 28. And I also have a family, so I have like 3 kids at the house. And so I think the way I compare it is like, I used to think that some of those structures were like, oh gosh, that's like that can't be where life is. Like if we're just so structured in, it's like the spark is somehow like not there anymore. But then when I like look at my own family, it's like I've got my oldest just finished 6th grade, my middle, she just finished 4th grade, and my youngest, he just finished 1st grade. And it's like, we have to have structure in our life for our family to
Kids
flourish.
crave it.
Totally. And so some of those structures that feel like, and you bump up against them sometimes as an artist or creative, and it kind of feels like, like I don't like this. This isn't great. It actually is the thing that it promotes us growing and being healthy together. I mean, that was a huge shift for me and Ansley in our marriage and life, just actually figuring out how to have like family structures. So when I apply that same kind of thinking to church, as we grow and as people come into the community, and as we reach more people, and as God brings more people into whatever it is that he's doing in our midst, it's like, I actually want to be a part of something that has some sense of structure to it. Even though the artist in me is like, oh, I can't, I genuinely wrestle with that some days. But I think the years I've had now, I'm way more grateful for it than I used to be. Just because I see, it's like, even when I'm bumping up against it, I actually see it as a good thing, and it can be a good thing. Now, on the flip side, we're in the process of doing some home renovation right now. Sometimes you got to blow up the structure and rebuild something new. So that can be tough too if you've been around somewhere for a long, long time. It's like, hey, I kind of actually helped with that idea back in the day, but we actually need to change that because we're doing something else now, and this thing doesn't work anymore. And so I don't know if that completely answers your question.
Well, do you think that you will always, or do you keep yourself like, I will always function first as a pastor, second as an artist?
That's a great question.
Because those are 2 completely different roles.
Yeah, totally.
But there's so many of us that are in both of those. In both spaces.
I know. I kind of always go like, I will probably answer yes to that question. I will be a pastor and an artist. However it looks or whatever and it's definitely shifted and changed over my time. But I think that's I love being in that space, both and. I don't think I'll be one or the other. I think what helps me as an artist is, again, even as our church has grown, and it is, like you said, our conference has grown. Crazy thing about our conference is it's like a new wave of 18 to 25-year-olds about every 4 or 5 years. So that's for me, again, I just look back on it and go, that's just the grace of God to continue to bring university age students into this space to hear this message of Jesus being central and the glory of God being the thing that you want to leverage your life for. And so he keeps bringing people into that. But what helps me is like, I go to our young adult ministry a lot, and I help. There's a thing that I lead, a gathering that pulls all our locations together, and just trying, I kind of have to mentally and just go, where am I really connected? Because if I start to get disconnected, I don't feel like my songs feel very connected to what God's doing in the community of faith.
So where is the connection? Is the connection on the pastoring side?
I think so. I mean, and just even like in our team level and showing up.
Because artistry almost has a solo thing attached to it.
Yeah.
So what's the cost in pastoring that's different than the cost in artistry for you?
The cost. I mean, I think it's. I don't know if this is
even
the cost,
if it's time.
Yeah, time.
Even if it's
sure.
time to invest the time into the youth group or whatever you're doing.
Totally. I think it's it's just getting around real everyday people who are on this journey with Jesus and whose eyes are opening up to see him. And when you're around that, even beyond the creative spaces of our church, and so then as a songwriter for the church, that just really helps me as I'm like, working on a song, or, I come up to Nashville and I'm working on something, and it's like, I just have a different frame or a different, it just helps tether me to like where people are.
Yeah. I think I asked that question because I do so much mentoring, and I'm talking to worship leaders in churches who want so much to be artists.
Right.
And so there's this dance that they're doing with serving their church, but then wanting to be an artist.
Right.
And there's something in the artistry that the pastoring is not going to give them, but there's something in the pastoring that the artistry doesn't give them.
Right.
And so you've been able to do it so beautifully, so many of you guys at Passion, because there's a balance, I think, but I almost wish that the requirement for artists is that they'd have to serve in a church for 10 years.
Totally. 100%. Well, I think, again, in the early days, it was really beautiful because it was by necessity. But I think one of the things that can be a challenge, especially as a church grows, is you can take the artists and the creatives, and now they can kind of become a world in and out to themselves. Yeah. And I think it's helpful to an artist to be an artist in the community. So you're an artist who loves Jesus and is knowing Jesus, next to a salesman who knows Jesus, and next to a teacher who knows Jesus, and a mom and a dad. And I think that way you actually get to experience, wow, there is something unique that I'm bringing. I think sometimes when we just can pull the creatives into their own little spaces, sometimes that's when it can get kind of weird, where it's like, well, my only interaction is if I got an invitation to use my gift or this, that, the other. And I think that just introduces a lot, what I've seen, and just in leading worship and all of those kinds of things. That's just where it introduces all kind of weird relationship with church of like, what is and this is even me internally, what's my connectivity to this thing if someone's not asking me to do X, Y, or Z? And so I think I've had to kind of unwind some of that to go, why am I here? Why am I connected to this thing? Well, it's because I believe in Jesus. Oh, and so do you, and so do you, and so do you. And so that has to be the connective tissue for me.
Yeah, because I'm always kind of, it's humorous to me that sometimes most of the time, the people that have competitive nature, or really super insecure, or deal with unworth, they feel called to the stage, to the very thing that makes them feel insecure and unworthy. Because when you start off as a pastor of a church, you don't really know what's going on. Most of the worship pastors in local churches across the globe, nobody knows who they are. Right. But when all of a sudden people know who you are because your video's gone viral or the music is selling, tell us, I just really want to you to kind of break down for you the personal journey of how to decipher the you that's on stage now and everybody sees you, to the you that nobody knew before, and how you bring in and pull out the element of pride, but bring in the element of humility and, the dance of false humility and true humility and all that kind of stuff. How's it been for you?
It's the wrestle of a lifetime.
Yeah.
I think we would be fooling ourselves to say that what a weird thing to do, to be able, the whole point of your job is to get eyes on Jesus. Yeah. And yet you stand in front of people and there's lights and there's maybe some screens or maybe there's something. And, but it's not even a production element thing for me, because I'm hearing you ask that question too. It's like, you could be leading worship in a church wherever you're listening to this today, and you could be big in your own world. Right. Like you could be well known in your own world. So it doesn't mean, whether or not you got a lot of YouTube streams or this, that, the other, it's like this wrestle is like for any of us who get up in front of people and try and lead and shepherd at the, and so I think I think one of the gifts of that is I have been a part of something that is a team. And so there are days when I didn't get chosen to do this thing, or that somebody didn't ask this, or they said, hey, we love your song. What if someone else sang it? And like, And I remember the first
Yeah.
time that happened, and it didn't feel good. You know,
Yeah.
like it didn't feel good because you're, especially as a songwriter, you're like, oh wow, this was something that was very meaningful, very personal to me. And I had a friend who I was just trying to process this with, and he's a great songwriter for the church. Many of your listeners would know who this person is. And he just said, he goes, hey Brett, but aren't you trying to write songs for the church to sing? And I was like, yeah. He goes, well, it probably shouldn't matter who sings it then. You probably want everyone to sing it. And I was like, I do. Yeah. And that was the big reframe for me. And that was a huge thing for me over the years. And for me as a songwriter, again, that was a huge shift, and it's awesome. Now it's like some of the biggest songs I've been a part of, I am not singing those songs.
Yeah.
You know? And but there's no lack. Like I think the enemy would tell you, oh, you're going to miss out if you don't hold on to X, Y, or Z. But for me, it's like, well, no, everything I have was given to me. And so I want to try and give that away. And that wasn't easy. It wasn't an easy process of giving that away. I had to wrestle my pride and my flesh and all of that. And, but yeah, so all that to say is, I don't think I've completely figured it out, but it's definitely, it's the wrestle.
And wouldn't you say too, Amanda Cook and I have this conversation all the time about just, it really doesn't matter in this, and I'll say business, because there's such an element of it. It's a business.
Sure.
That you're called to it. You're walking with the Lord. You release what you feel like God's telling you to release. But every time you release it, it's like you gotta play the game. You know what I'm saying? And there's an element that you're constantly going through what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I think it's so really healthy for worship leaders just in small churches, or maybe you are big in your own town, to realize that this is a common thing. Mm-hmm. It's a very common thing that God will always deal with the pride that's in us, that we come to the table still bearing with everything that we release. Yeah. And every time that, I'm 58. Every time you release a project, you hold your breath and you almost brace for impact, because there's always going to be something that you thought you dealt with that all of a sudden comes up again.
Yeah, you're like, oh, where did that come from?
Yeah, and it's almost about, and maybe this is something you would attest and agree to, but it's almost about, where am I in the process of my freedom that God still needs to break my chains?
Wow.
You know what I'm saying?
For sure.
Like for you, what has been has it been those moments where it's like, oh, I didn't get to sing the song? You know, I'll never forget Jenny Riddle, who's the writer of Rev song, Revelation song, and the reality that she would write it, but that her voice would never be the one to carry it. And how horribly shocking that was to her system.
Yeah.
It was Carrie.
Right.
And then everybody would give Carrie credit for the song.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so what are for you in writing some of these really big, beautiful, worship hits, that was the hardest thing for you, that every time's a surprise? Like, is it that I don't get to sing it? Or is it that I didn't get the recognition, or I didn't win the award? What is it for you that's hits the hardest? That is your roundabout thing that you have to learn.
That I have to learn. I mean, I think it's there's so many things. I mean, I think it's all of that. I think it's you want to be known for the things that you put your hand to. Yeah. And I don't think there's something incredibly wrong all the time in that space. I think I want to be, again, I want my life to be known for doing something great, and but at the same time, I think when I feel that, it's just remembering like, hey, God sees it. God knows, I think even now for me, if I am part of a song and it's being sung, and sometimes I'm not even I might not even be, because our team has grown even over the years. And so I might be over here in the crowd in the moment that it's coming out for the first time. And I actually, I think I wrestled in that moment sometimes too, but then there's this thing of going like, oh, but I remember that moment where I'm in my little space at my house, or if wherever I was, if I was driving, and that idea just came. And how awesome is it that God can take this little thing that nobody knows about, nobody sees, And now look at this. Look what he's doing. And nobody knows. Nobody knows all those details. Nobody sees all those dots, but he does.
Yeah.
And so how great is that? And
Yeah,
so
you find yourself reminding yourself of the seed.
Yeah. Oh,
and how
all the
that
time.
song came.
To me, that's the holiest of the moments, you know? That's just that. I think about those moments often, you know, because, and the other thing too, that is helpful to remember is, you had no idea usually when that moment came that it would be, that something would go. And now I do think we need to say too, there's a lot of moments in writing songs. I have a full Dropbox. I joke around that the Dropbox is the secret place, you know, where some of the best songs are still on the Dropbox. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But all that to say is, I just think that, the space where, for me, that almost those moments where nobody sees or nobody knows about, or that little writing room where you're there with your friends and God just does something. That, to me, that's the holiest of the spaces.
Yeah.
And it's not for everybody. It's for us.
What about?
And he did that for us.
Yeah.
And that's pretty awesome.
To encourage us. Yeah, I find that kind of rather striking about God, is that he lets us get the testimonies.
Yeah.
You know, and I have this huge box of, you know, when we send mail, actual stamp mail.
Yep, I've heard of it.
It's so full that you can barely even close the little chest anymore. But the Lord said to keep all those letters, so that when the days would get dark and I would question my calling, to open up that box and start reading what the songs did to people that made them actually write a letter, stick a stamp on it, and mail it in.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? Those are things that it can't get lost on you.
Totally.
That God's doing those things.
Yes, and he's doing it in such a way too. I think, again, the other thing, like when God does something like that, and you just realize so much of it is out of our hands.
Yeah.
What was in our hands in some ways was the day to show up and to go to work and go to write some songs and to show up and to open your hands. And then God does what he does. And then how he takes things, it's just so, there's so many factors, and there's so many things that are beyond. It's beyond whether or not you have a publishing deal. It's beyond whether or not you're connected to a church that does music and has a conference. Like those things are great, and God's moving in and through those things. But the songs, I think that you and I are talking about, like Revelation song, that song is bigger. It's bigger than whoever wrote it, whoever sang it. That song has circled the world 100 times. But that's because the Holy Spirit said, I would like it to circle the world 100 times. Right. You know?
Hey guys, I want to just take a little segue here and tell everybody and get the word out about the new community and tribe that I am in the middle of right now on redefining.com. If you want more content, I've had a lot of people ask me for, when are you going to do this? And when are you going to do that? And when are you going to do this? Well, I have created a platform on my website under the tab community, where you will be then taken to tribes. And I am inviting you to be part of my tribe. On that, there is a subscription tier that you can subscribe to, where you can get different content. We are doing Bible studies and daily devotionals, and throwing some cooking shows in there on my favorite recipes, and doing mentorships and songwriting things that we're going to be uploading this year. So if you want to be part of my tribe, part of my community, please go to redefining.com, click on that community tab, and join my community. Okay, well then that prompts a question me to ask you specifically. What do you think, as a guy, as a pastor, as someone that's been in this for a long time? You've been at the same church for 15 years.
Yeah.
You don't go to your job or go get in your car and go to your place of work without knowing what you're doing now. You don't do it insecure. Sometimes we probably still do. What is okay? Because I get this question a lot by young worship leaders. What is okay in the journey of artistry to ask the Lord to give you?
Wow.
Like, what's okay? And what do you think the Lord's okay with asking?
Yeah. That's a great question. I don't know if I've thought about it like that before. I think for me, just each day, it's just things just continue to maybe simplify in the sense that you know, like you said, our world, there's organization, there's church, this is happening, what's happening over here, you know, we're working on music, you know, this is coming, you know, those things. I think the thing is when you've seen a few of those waves, you realize, well, this is life. These things happen, you know, like this isn't, in some ways this is new and there's something to deal with today.
Yeah.
But at the same time, this is not new. And this isn't, you know, we all have something that we're up against or dealing with or whatever. And I think for me, it's just going, can I continue to get into this space where I'm helping people see and know Jesus, and where is he moving and what is he working on? And then I do think that he is personal enough to go, hey, what is that desire that it has kept pulling on your heart, and to ask him for it, and to say, and for him to go, hey, well, I'd like you to take a step towards it, and then to do it, and then watch him do whatever he might do, you know? And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of room for that.
For the young worship leader that would like be watching Passion, be watching you guys, you Christian Melody, like all you guys up there that are writing the songs that they're watching go all across the world.
Mm-hmm.
And there's benefits to that.
Mm-hmm.
There's royalty checks to that. And there's I think a whole generation of young people that are looking at what can be made from that, as opposed to all the things you're talking about in the last 15 years that got you to this.
Yeah.
And so there is almost a mentality in a generation that I see a lot of at my age, where they want to skip over the 15 years and go straight to the royalty checks. And so I think I ask, like, where's the balance of what is okay to ask for?
Yeah. Because
I've watched God answer the prayers to the young person that's like, hey, I need to feed my family.
Yeah.
Hey, I need to do this.
Yep.
How have you balanced out, like, okay, we got to write a hit. Like, we got to get in this songwriting and we got to write a hit.
Yeah.
When you know what a hit looks like, how do you go into the next songwrite without wanting to write the hit?
What a great question. I mean, on the flip side, the insecurity as a songwriter, you know, when you have been a part of a song that has
done
moved
well,
on, and you go, well, I hope God will, I hope he'll do that again, or he'll like. There is that, I think, on the backside of that, where you just show up and you go, oh, well, I know this guy was a part of this song, and you're like, well, I don't know, I'm just here to write songs today. So I don't know what will come, I don't know how it'll be, so no pressure, you know. And but I think to answer your question on like what's okay to ask for, or like how do you navigate that kind of space, you know, I think early on, that's that Matthew 6 thing where Jesus says, seek first the kingdom and everything else will be added. And so I remember early on in the early days of Passion City Church, I was leading at a few different things around Atlanta. And the church was starting, and I was not on staff at the church. And so like I legit needed to pay my rent, and you know, it was like whatever it was a month. And then I just, we were going to start our student ministry, and me and my wife were going to be really like integral of the team about doing that. Well, I didn't feel right about consistently leading a youth group down the street, because I felt like, well, I just need to like really pour in my efforts here, even though this thing was kind of the thing that was paying my rent at the time. And we just kept coming back to Matthew 6, seek first the kingdom. Okay, great. Well, the kingdom calling for us was to establish this student ministry at our church. So I will do that. And then I don't really know how I'm going to pay my rent. And then August came around, and then September, and all of a sudden something showed up in the mail, crazy, and it covered the rent. And then October, nothing, November, nothing. Then December came, and something showed up that covered October, November, and December. And for me, it was so small, but for me, it was that pivotal moment of going, okay, I see how this works. do the thing that God's called you to do. On the flip side, in that same season, I was also substitute teaching. I used to go work at Passion in the mailroom back when, especially in the days when Louis was selling so many DVDs of that indescribable talk.
Yes.
And I would literally on Monday, it's so funny, guys like me, Pat Barrett, like there was a bunch of us in that late 2000s, early 2010 worship leaders who would go play on the weekends, but then on Monday I would be in the mailroom, filling in DVDs.
It's hilarious.
And so I say that because I've also had meetings with guys on our church, and I'd say, hey, like you should get a job. How about that? Like go get a job, do your thing, do your art, serve the church. But if whatever that is not paying your rent and you're married and about to have a kid, guess what? You need to get a job.
Yeah.
And I had older musicians kind of tell me that. And it's not that that's like taking matters into my own hands. I just think it's doing what you can do with what you have. And I had a free Tuesday, so I would go substitute teach on a middle school, school, get paid $80 a day, and then I think as I continue to do that, God would open up different opportunities. And I think in it all, it's really it's stewardship. It's going, God, I want to steward the opportunities that you give me. And yes, he's blessed our family. And so, again, I go back to the parable of the talents in that regard, 5, 10, or 20, it doesn't really matter the amount. It's just, did you bury it in a hole or did you invest it? Did you leverage it? What did you do with the thing that God gave you?
Yeah.
And that is what you will be accountable for.
Do you think that the majority of the church is using Matthew 6 and seek first the kingdom? When I say the church, let me rephrase that. Do you think that the Christian music industry is teaching and instructing Matthew 6, or are we setting people up for the success of a royalty check?
It's a great question. And I'm sure
because you've seen a lot.
Sure. And I'm sure it's all over the map, I'm sure it's all over the map. I think again, just the world that I've been able to inhabit and watching Louis and Shelley navigate that over years, I would say 100% that's where I'm learning it from, especially as I see, it's pretty amazing to see how, God moves in one way and how that impacts another way, to see like what we've been able to do to serve a generation. I mean, even you think about even just logistically gathering people in a space like Mercedes-Benz, and just to see how God provides for that, or the work of, right now we're doing a lot of work into translating scripture, all over the world for people who don't have scripture. And even in our city right now, as we're doing this podcast, our church has been doing a week-long thing serving our city. And so I am seeing that where it's like, okay, cool. Like that's in the big ways, but I'm also seeing it in the small and the personal ways. And so, I've been very fortunate to be in a world that does model that and does show that. Obviously I can't speak for, I don't want to speak for the whole music industry, but
I think it's actually really the way that you're responding to, I think it's so key to understand for people, because I think there's such a longing in young worship leaders to have solid foundations. And you're talking about having a really solid foundation with a great head of leadership. Doesn't mean it's perfect.
No.
It's a church. It doesn't mean it's perfect. But the intention is that there would be accountability, and that there's learning, and that there's the fostering of really beautiful theology. Most people sometimes don't have that.
Right.
And so there's a longing, I think, in a lot of young worship leaders, and they come into their understanding of what we're talking about because they don't have that foundation. And what I hear you saying is, I have that. And therefore, because I have that, my mentality when I look at this is that even if there were a problem, you'd probably, your chain would be yanked by leadership saying, yo, bro, calm down. That's not what this is about.
Wow. Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's what kind of makes me, I think because I carry that mothering thing, there's so many more that come into it wanting the shiny penny in it.
Yeah.
And they don't have the foundations of churches that actually cultivate relationship, accountability. And so our industry that I think is so beautiful in the Christian industry is kind of marred by the lack of great foundation in local churches.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. But let me ask you this. Do you feel like if people are kind of seeing like, maybe the effects of something that connects with a lot of people, whether that's royalties or notoriety or whatever that is, do you see them actually like attain that if that's kind of like where they're in, like going back to the intention, like do you, because like for me, that feels like for me, the intention has to be like, oh, this is what we're doing. And we'll leave the consequences of that like in the hands of God.
Yeah.
Like, do you see people go after that and attain that or get what they wanted?
I think what I see is they come at it from two different formats. You start off pastoring and then you get really weary pastoring. So you go to artistry. And I think to do it beautifully, you have to understand servanthood and understand relationship.
Yep.
And I don't know that sometimes the church does a really great job at servicing relationship with Jesus because we come at it a lot of times from duty. And then it takes duty to run a church. And it's not really about finding the presence of God on Sunday morning and leading people to that. It's about getting a service done.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Which there is that in
Sure,
that.
there's logistics, yes.
And I think that a lot of that tainting that happens to individuals that end up getting kind of completely confused in the process of it and then going after it for the wrong reasons is very easily.
And then you get kind of turned around.
And I think you can pinpoint the epicenter of the implosion by the lack of fostering any kind of parenting or mothering or fathering or having anybody in their past that said they were somebody amazing.
Wow.
I think for me, that's what I find is I sometimes want to dial parents' numbers or dial pastors' numbers and say, why didn't you parent?
Wow.
Why didn't you father? Why didn't you mother? Because I'm seeing a generation of worship leaders who've never been parented. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like you've had it done so beautifully.
Right.
And so and that's why I think it's so important for you to share that, to almost create a longing in young worship leaders to be like, I need to be at a place that carries those things, not in perfection.
Sure.
Because I don't think there's any perfection in the church.
It doesn't exist, obviously.
But to look
until
for those
we see
things,
Jesus.
Yeah. But to look for those things while you're aware of your own frailty.
Right.
Because I do hear you actually, there's so much humility on you, Brett. Like there's so much humility. I don't think that was something that was birthed at Passion. I think you came to Passion carrying that. And that was fostered because you had really great leadership. And so it's easy for the Lord to be like, what can I do here? Like, look at the creativity here. What can I do here? And I think the favor of God sometimes rests equally and beautifully on people that don't just want the fame and fortune, but they actually want to see Jesus move a generation.
Right.
And I do think that that's the difference that I've seen, that I feel that's on Passion, is because you guys are asking questions I don't really hear a lot of people asking, and you stay a family. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. It makes sense. I mean, that really is the heartbeat of what we're doing, is to see God move in a generation. And we're seeing it. I mean, like right now with what God's doing in young people, I mean, again, having been a part of Passion for 15 years, going in the early 2000s as a college student, but I mean, there is something unique that God's doing on the earth right now in this moment with 18 to 25-year-olds, and it's blowing my mind.
Do you feel like it's connected to true revival?
I think so.
Okay, then what is true revival?
I heard, when I went up to Asbury when the outpouring came out and spent a wonderful 5-6 hours just being in God's presence in that space. And one of the leaders that was steering that, I think, I don't want to completely misquote, it might've been Jonathan Edwards, but it's basically the intensity of the normal, the intent, like basically the speeding up the intensity of the normal work of the Holy Spirit. So it's what the Holy Spirit is doing, period, since Acts 2. Like he's doing, he has been doing this. He is building the church on the earth. Like that is what's happening right now. But I do think that we're seeing an intensification of that. And I think during COVID, I kind of stepped in to help lead our young adult ministry for a couple of years, like as the leader, the pastor. And what I've noticed about this generation is they're coming of age, is they're coming up in an age of a world that is just unhinged. And so different than the world that we've come up in. And, I'm a millennial, so I came up with like everything's possibility, like the dawn of a new millennium, like if you could dream it, you can do it.
Right.
And it's so hopeful,
so hopeful.
And at the same
time,
not anymore. But I think there is a great gift in it not being, because culturally, the systems and the structures of this world, they're failing. And so, there's a lot of confusion. And so that's what this generation is longing for, is like, give me clarity in the midst of confusion. And when you hold out the truth of the gospel, when you hold out that Jesus is real, that he's alive, ruling and reigning on a throne, and that if you put your faith in him, you can be brought to life. Just that simple gospel message is I think radically changing these people who are going, great, I need something sure, because there is nothing sure. Job isn't sure, politics aren't sure, just opportunity is not sure ahead of me, relationships not sure, just so much of that. And I think Jesus is meeting people in that space. And as you look at even just some of the stats that are coming, is you're seeing an uptick in even church attendance, for the first time in like 30 or 40 years. And so I do think that what we're seeing is really amazing.
Hey, I want to take some time to just, again, thank Amazing Kids Curriculum. I love Amazing Kids. Connie and Tyler Bates have created an incredible children's curriculum for churches. And what is so great about this is, if you're planting a church and you are, perhaps you're in a church that's maybe not a big church, but it's a small church that's growing, but you really need Bible-based, Holy Spirit-filled curriculum for your littles in your church. This curriculum is stunning. You can access this by going to amazing.kids and looking through their material and how to sign up for your type of church. Again, this is incredible curriculum. It is Bible, theology-based, Holy Spirit-filled curriculum, and you will not be disappointed in what God does with this curriculum and how he uses it to bring life and the word to the kids in your church. What do you think this generation is full of that they offer the world?
I think hunger. I think hunger for God, and I think that their ability to suss out whether if it's real or authentic. I think their ability to kind of see through, like, hey, are you just like giving me the upfront show, or is this the real thing? Is this the rubber meets the road real thing? And I think their ability to do that is what they'll offer the world. Is their BS meter is really good, and I think we need that, because there's a lot of BS. It's just hard to navigate.
I was asking the Lord, because my kid's 20, so
he's right there.
He's right there in it. And first year of high school, COVID hits, and just watching that as a parent, and then as a parent who's spiritual, and really asking Holy Spirit constantly, like, what am I seeing? What am I seeing? What am I seeing? Where's the attack? What's the enemy after? Really thinking, at the end of that, what an assignment from hell it was against this generation. And the picture that God gave me was, technology is so profound that when we uncover a pyramid, and where scientists are profoundly in awe of how a pyramid was made with no technology, only the brain of true artisanship. And I feel like the Lord kind of gave me that picture of, the true artisanship of the yesteryear that didn't need the technology. And I felt like he said, what this generation is lacking is their internal emotional technology has been being taken, and they're going to have to actually go back to the resource of the artisan and that there's greatness in them that will stand the test of time, that will be uncovered years to come as some of the truest artisans, because they didn't have the techniques that we had or that you had in your millennial status of, hopeful.
Right.
They weren't hopeful. They almost had to thrive off their own, reaching for it without going to Google and finding it. You know what I'm saying? Where their raw reach was a raw reach for the real, as opposed to, we can just look this up on the internet and figure this out.
Right.
And that actually, what that produces is what is still today uncovered as insane, architecture.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Almost mentally and emotionally.
Yeah.
And that's how I pray for even my kid, is that whatever he lacks because of the fight, that he would be given that in a revival to do things internally that that are just profoundly incredible. Does that make sense?
Totally. I think that's, I think that is the hopeful thing for this generation, is every generation will have their thing. One of the pastor of our church in DC he's Ben Stewart. He's amazing. He's one of the best Bible teachers ever around. And but he talks about some of the anxiety and the things that this generation's up against. And one of the ways he says is, it's not your fault, but it is your problem. And I think that the Lord is meeting this generation and help leading them through that. And into those hopeful spaces that are filled with life, and there will be restoration and repair. What the enemy's tried to take from this generation, he's going to restore it. And but I love what he's doing with young people. I mean, just some of the moments and the tone and the temperature of worship has totally shifted. And I think, again, over the last 5 or so years, I just think nominalism is gone. Like this thing of going I'm just going to show up because that's what people do. We don't do that for anything, and not just church, but we're not nominal about anything anymore. And so what I notice is when people come into spaces like Passion or come to the conference, it's like they came to be there. They wanted to be there. They wanted to meet God there. And so So
do you think if nominalism is out, do you think entitlement is out?
I hope so. I don't know. TBD on entitlement. We'll see. It would be great.
Well, because when you use that word, I'm like, sometimes that word can leak into the
for sure
entitlement
100%.
And there's a lot of that out there.
There is a lot of that. I mean, I don't know if I could say entitlement's out all the way, but maybe it's because I'm getting a little crusty. But I'm like, come on, guys, we had to work really hard.
Well, then talk about that as it relates to where do we go from here? Creatively. In our songwriting. If the language of a generation is no longer okay with the words and the phrases we've been using to save them thus far.
What's the future?
What's the future? Because I don't know about you, but there is, I'm kind of bored with worship music.
Okay.
Because we're using the same phrases. And actually this is a great thing to actually ask you too in the course of this question. I know that Brandon's got a lot of flack for this podcast he did, which I think he was kind of taken out of context a bit.
I agree.
But there is something in what he was saying about, the guy in the back that can't relate to it, can't relate to what is happening on stage in our verbiage of holy, holy, holy. I don't think we change holy, holy, holy.
Agreed.
So I do think he was taken out of context in that. But where's the language of a generation? We're talking about this youthful generation. You guys are seeing it, and you see the new ones come every single year, fill up the stadiums with this hunger and this passion. How long before they don't want to sing the songs that don't make them prostrate before the Lord?
That's a great question. I mean, well, to touch on that, I agree with you. I think that clip was actually cut short because I think I saw the full clip and he's like, we want to get to that place. We just want to think about the people who are coming in. And I think that's the heart of a pastor, and so
which Brendan is that he's
100%.
He's seen it.
Right.
He's seen so much.
Right. And so I resonate with that of going, it's again, and that's the hard part about things online is it's like, this is really a both and people. This isn't, we're not watering down anything at the same time because of what we've seen and experienced. If we are not concerned why are we leading people if we're not leading people and we have to be thinking about who we're leading. And so it's both and I think in that discussion. But the future, I remember thinking about, okay, I had this great, wave before me at Passion with, just legendary people. And I would think, what is that new sound? What is that thing? And then I remember as like kind of 2017 started, I think that record, which is the Worthy of Your Name album, we kind of carried a lot of that, like our wave kind of carried a lot of that album. And it didn't sound like the old wave, but it felt like it was connected to the family, but it sounded different. But it wasn't this crazy, like, this crazy. Sometimes it's this crazy production thing, or it's this, whatever. But sometimes it's just like new hands carrying the old thing. And I think that's what you hear, what the new sound will be. And I've heard Louis say it like this. With our songs, we want them to be timely. Of like, there's what God's doing in this moment. Yeah. And at the same time with church songs, you want them to be timeless. And we don't get to decide what songs are going to be timeless or not. But for me, I remember, I'm a big Beatles fan. And John Lennon, when he wrote Happy Christmas, War is Over, that he set out to write a song that was 100 years old, 50 years later. So he's halfway there. Wow. But it's crazy when you think about that song was written in a time where war was happening. And so, but he didn't get hyper specific on the exact war, the exact time, the exact thing. Sometimes hyper specific, I can't say that word, but being really specific is really cool. That's a thing you can do. Yeah. But at the same time, that song was written in such a way that 50 years later, I can listen to that and I can still feel it makes sense in my moment and in my time. And I think great church songs are like that, I don't know. That's what we're here for. it's to go out. That's why I love Charles Wesley and I love, I love all these things that how are we singing Hark the Herald Angels Sing 300 years later and it's still resonating on the earth. Yeah. Music, that's what's awesome about music is like it transcends our moment. And so I don't really know if I have an answer to your question, but that's what I nerd out and geek out about. It's like, how do you be so tapped into what God is doing here and now at the same time to be so connected to this eternal thing that is beyond like the here and now? Yeah. I don't know.
Do you feel like as a worship songwriter for the church, that it is your responsibility to evolve and press God for the more?
Yeah, absolutely. To seek him and to ask him for that.
And to believe for it.
That's what, I just love it because as many songs as there are, and it's just, again, it's the Psalms, sing a new song, declare salvation day after day. Like, so, I think, sitting in that moment, I was just reflecting back on that moment at Passion 2024 when Christian stepped into Agnew's Day and God just rested on us. And even then, the revelation of him, that's all these songs flow out of that revelation that God, help me see you more. So if you're listening and you're a songwriter, you're a worshiper, that's really what we should be asking is help me see you more. Help me know you more. Help me see what you're doing. Help me be a part of what you're doing. And as we do that, I feel like the language and the song and the expression of that thing we'll find it. We'll get it.
Yeah.
You know, but it's like, help me see you, God. And the song will flow out of that. I love, what is it? Tozer says it like this. He says, God speaks and a hymn is the musical echo of his voice, you know? And so I think that's, for me, that's it. It's just help me know you more. I've been walking with you since I was a teenager, since I was a kid, you know, like, but yet there are things about you, God, that I still don't know. You are infinite. You are eternal, you know? And so there are things about your character. There's things, you know, you're unchanging. You're not changing on me, but yet somehow I haven't even scratched the surface. And what I've seen has changed my life.
Yeah.
You know, what I've seen is enough to completely transform me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, how amazing, there's more to know.
Are there songs that we should be singing that we're not singing yet?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, that's kind of, I feel like in my songwriting journey, you know, that's kind of one of the things that helps me know what to write. Like, you know, I think when I feel, hey, we have lots of these kinds of songs, you know, I feel like a few years back, a lot of songs were about our identity. And I think it's so beautiful because our identities were under attack and, you know, and we were lying, you know, we just had all these lies in our minds and our hearts. And so we need those songs. So it's not like say, oh, we don't need songs that are about who we are in Christ. We need those. But all of a sudden, I think if the pendulum swings real hard on it, it's like, great, I'm at the center of worship somehow weird way.
Yeah.
You know? And so for me, what that did is as a songwriter, it made me want to write songs that are just so God-centric, so adoration, you know, praise, like, and so we talk about it at Passion is like, do we have a well-rounded diet of songs? And there's probably like 5 or 6 kinds of songs that a really healthy church should be singing. So you don't need all songs that say this or all songs that say that, but you need like gospel-centric songs, you know, adoration. You need prayerful, devotional songs of war, you know, that are declarative. You know, you need this well-rounded. You don't need all songs that are just like a hymn, like, you know, like theological, like download. But you do, if you don't have any of those, you need some of those. You know, and so, or
how often are you collaborating with Louis about the songs that you should be writing for series that he's teaching or things like that?
I think it's kind of a constant thing of just kind of staying in step and in tune with that. And our mutual friend, John Duke is a huge, he's amazing. Shout out, John. And, we love you. But John kind of helps with that with Louis and Shelley, and just I think especially for a lot of our key songwriters around Passion, it's like, hey, it seems like we need more songs in this area, this area, that area, and then the gift for us too, we're definitely doing that for church, but then also Passion does come around every year, and so there's just by the time the year rolls around, it's time to kind of to look up, but I think. The way we do it is like we're constantly writing, just always, trying to show up and be open to the Lord and what he wants to do. And somehow he might blow it through and a song gets written. But then usually for us, it's kind of like that late summer, early fall. We'll kind of like pull together what has everybody been working on, and then usually whatever those songs are tend to rise to the top. And so again, I'm just very fortunate to be in a community that I don't even have to pick. I'm not picking all of these songs. I'm not deciding on all of that. It really is a community. There's lots of our voices that kind of speak into, hey, I'm sensing this or I'm feeling that, and and again, at the end of the day, I've got a pastor and his wife that really are good at that and knowing that, and then value that as well. So
hey, a little segue here to just remind those of you who really love what the podcast is carrying, love what I do. You know that I mentor, you know that I work with creative and artists. We are in some exciting things this year with my nonprofit, Wearing Justice, but I can't do a lot of these things unless I have help and donations. We are a charitable organization, a nonprofit, and it's Christian education based. And if you are out there and you love to donate to things that not just inspire people, but heal people while people are being inspired, would you consider donating to my nonprofit, Wearing Justice? If you just click this QR code that you're seeing on the screen, you can donate and give any amount of donation. It was greatly appreciated. I would so appreciate it because I can keep doing what I feel like God's called me to do and really keep believing in artists everywhere and how God is using the arts to heal people's heart. And I love that. I just love what I do. I want to keep this up, but I need your help to do it. So would you consider today making a donation to Wearing Justice and help keep this all up and running? What is something that you have seen in worship that has changed your life? And then what is something that you want to see happen in worship that would be life-changing? And that can be like live in a live setting where you just stood back and like, I would give my life to just do this.
I mean, I just think back to those moments. I mean, like my very first passion thing as a senior in high school, it was at the Atlanta Civic Center. Charlie Hall is leading Sweep Me Away.
Oh, man.
Do you remember that song?
Yes.
It's like 4 lines.
Wow, yeah.
But I don't know what happened to me in that moment.
Wow.
Like, it was just me and Jesus, and it marked my life.
Wow.
It changed me. And I want that for people.
Yeah.
And I think, and again, I just, fast forward to Passion 2024 and that Agnus Dei moment. It's like, I want to be in that space more often than not. I wish the church, when I say the church, I'm talking about just the people coming, the people that make up the community. I wish we had a desire and a bigger view of Jesus, who he really is. One of the things, we went through Revelation last year as a church. Louis preached through the whole book.
Wow.
Incredible. If you should go listen to it online. That Lamb's Book of Life song came out of just being in church and it just being so moved by that picture of Jesus. And, one of the things Louis challenged our church with is like, a lot of us have Jesus in Nazareth, like that picture of Jesus, but who Jesus is today, right now, is Jesus is the lion like lamb sitting on the throne of eternity. And that will change your prayers. That will change your faith. That will change how you move and interact through the world. Yeah. And I want to see the church get that, and experience it. I want that more. When I get all like, insular and in my head about things, I want to get a bigger view of him. So that's what I want.
Are you bold enough to ask the Lord to give you the song for that?
Oh, yes, I would love that. God, give us that song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So last question I'm going to ask you is, what is your, and you could probably answer this probably maybe from both the pastor and the artist, I guess, sensing you, but if you were to give one offering of hope and encourage to the 20-year-old worship leader, 22-year-old worship leader that's just gotten a job at a church, wants to be a songwriter, wants to write songs for their church, what would you say, given your last 15 years on staff at a church, that would be something they could hold on to? Yeah.
I would say just ask God to move in your world, wherever it is, whatever it is, the things that you're holding onto, whatever he's put in your hands, and say, God, would you bring the fire of the Holy Spirit into these gatherings? And would you give us songs that express what it is that you want to do in us? Would you give us songs to express our love to you? And don't get wrapped up with like trying to export that all over the place. I think that I'm really grateful I didn't have that in my developmental. I mean, I'm still developing, I'd like to think, but just that there's a lot of spaces I'm really glad it wasn't live streamed. You know what I mean? So don't get hung up on that. Like, God will figure out how to get whatever he wants to wherever he wants. But if you've got a room of 50 people, 100 people, 500 people, pray that God would use all of your creativity to stir the hearts of those people for him, and to bring other people to do that with. You can't do it by yourself. You can't do it. And so that's why I think I love being in a band. I always, when I go play all these youth camps, I always feel bad for the speaker because they were just, by themselves. We were a crew, everywhere we rolled, we'd change the temperature of wherever we were. And so, ask God to, the harvest is plentiful. God says, ask for the workers. So I'd pray for that. But I would get to know Jesus. If I were, in my 20s, I would be wanting to know everything I could know about Jesus, and I'd want to be wanting to know everything I can know about music. And I think that when I think about my friends, those of us who, we've kind of come up and we've been in Passion, because like I said, the guy that plays drums at Passion, we first played on a high school sidewalk together, you got
deep relationship.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's like, we would do whatever to figure out how to do it. And I think that's what I want to see in this next generation. It's just that I'm not out here for views or stream, this or the other, but I'm going to be out here. I'm going to do it, whether somebody tells me how to do it or not. And that's the kind of zeal that is in Gen Z that I do love. But it's just, if you could follow that up with a bit of a work ethic, I think, wow, that would be a pretty powerful combination.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brett.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you, Rita. This is awesome.